What's up, folks? This is Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Last week I did a video on the One Ring. I talked about the rules, the game, what's been released for it. But today I'm going to do a deep dive into the solo modes, the Strider mode, the Moria mode. I'm going to do some character creation. I'm going to show you how a combat works, and much more. If you haven't watched my last video and you want to check that out, here's a link right up here. But right now, let's get into the One Ring. The format for today's video is going to be a little bit different than most of my videos, as I did not pre-script this video's content. If you like what you see here today, let me know about it and let me know what you'd like to see in future videos. It may affect how I decide to create my future content. Either way, if you enjoy the video or my other content, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to meet a bunch of like-minded gamers that love to talk games, check out my Discord server, for which you will find a link to in the description of this video. Last, if you want to contribute to the support of my channel and you'd like to become a member, check that out. It's only $2 a month for the basic membership, and the D20 members are at $5 a month. And with that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Last time I showed you guys my One Ring binder that I've made for solo play, but I've made some additions and some reorganization of that even since last week, and that's what we're going to be going through today. And first we're going to be talking about Strider mode, and that is going to be the One Ring's official solo play variant. Strider Mode's a PDF you can pick up off of DriveThruRPG for around $5, and it is a short document, so if you want a printed copy, it is not overly abusive to your ink cartridges to print a copy. The game itself remains very similar to the group game, which is one of the reasons I love Strider Mode as compared to a lot of the solo mode offerings that people have done for different games. So when you are creating a character for Strider mode, there are some differences that you're going to have from the standard game. That's going to be the main place where this changes the rules a bit. Whenever you create your character, in the normal One Ring, you get 10 experience points for your previous experience. In Strider mode, you get 15. Your fellowship score in the standard game is based off of the members of your fellowship. Well, since you're just one, that has to be calculated a little bit differently. It's going to be 3 plus whatever you gain from your virtues and cultural blessings, as well as whatever bonus your patron gives you. In the standard game, you have a fellowship focus. That is the member of the group that you are most attached to, and you get bonuses for trying to support them, and you take penalties whenever they are harmed. Well, obviously, if you're on your own, you don't have that here. It does have a note about not choosing virtues that are focused on other members of the party, as there aren't going to be any. The Strider distinctive feature is one that is easy to misinterpret, but basically it gives you inspired on all of your rolls when you're in the journeying phase. So inspired is going to double the bonus you get from hope. So when you spend a point of hope, normally you add 1 success die. If you're in Strider mode, you're inspired, so you add 2. The patrons from the core rulebook are all covered here in the Strider mode, and there's also a random quest generator. Now you might think, well, with only a D6 of quests for each patron, that's a little bit small a sample size, but they leave them generic enough that each one could be many different specific quests, especially when you use the context tools that are presented later in the product. You do have experience milestones. This is a way to give yourself a guideline for deciding how much adventure point and skill point rewards you should be handing out at the end of each session, or you can just use 3 and 3 like they suggest in the regular game. The fortune and ill fortune tables are not required, but they do provide an opportunity to give some guidance whenever you roll that Eye of Sauron. You might want to give yourself a surprise and say, well, what does that mean? So the Eye of Sauron doesn't necessarily mean that you failed terribly at your task. It could mean that fate intervened in a negative way. And so I rolled a Eye of Sauron on my stealth test. Well, it says you are hindered by difficult terrain or unfavorable environment. Okay, so maybe I stepped on a branch and it cracked and it drew attention to me. That would be a way that that could be interpreted. Or maybe I rolled a symbol of Gandalf on my attack. Well, what does that mean? You may bypass a threat without attracting notice. So maybe I killed this orc that I was fighting, and his friends didn't see that I am now free to wander off. There's a lot of different ways to interpret it, but the system is there for you if you need it. It does give much the same options for the special success results. If you roll a 6 or an Elven T on the success dice, just to give you an idea of how you can spend those. It talks about risk levels and how those work, which is again in the One Ring core book. But the telling table is the yes-no oracle for this. And it has different chances. So like, if you think that it is unthinkable that the thing you're asking would be true, then you'd have to roll a 10. Oh, and there I did. How about that? But if you thought that it was very likely, you might only have to roll a 4. And I rolled a 3. So the dice are definitely cooperating in this video. The lore table is going to be your context tables for the One Ring RPG in Strider mode. And basically this would be your noun, verb, adjective from others, but in here it is your action, aspect, and focus. So if I wanted to get more information on something that I wasn't sure how it would be defined, I would roll maybe action and focus. So I would roll a feat die and a success die. I got a 7 on the feat die, a 5 on the success. So I would go to the feat die 7 table and the 5 success die, and this is my action. It would be reject. And then I would roll again for my focus, and I got a 4 and a 5. So I go to feat die 4 and a 5 on the success. Guard. Reject guard. Well, depending on the context of the story, reject guard could mean a lot of different things. It could mean that maybe the person that has been assigned to guard you and give you protection is actually an enemy, maybe an agent of Sauron. Or maybe you're the one that's supposed to be guarding someone else and they are reluctant to accept your help. It could create a lot of different answers based upon the context of the story. The Eye of Mordor is the way that the game tracks the knowledge of Sauron of your actions. And it is listed as an optional rule in the core rules, but it is suggested that you use it in the Strider mode. And I think the reason for that is it drives action. And basically, depending upon what type of a land you are in, if it's a borderland, a wildland, or a darkland, it gets more and more likely that Sauron is going to notice your presence. And if you break the threshold, you have a revelation episode. And with Strider mode, you have a random table that can help you define what that might be. There I rolled a 4. Enemy minions launch an ambush or lay a trap. And that would mean different things based upon where in the world you were and what had happened before. Some of the things that will add to the I score is what culture you come from. They're going to be much higher if you have an elf. Any famous weapons and armor you carry, it's going to raise your score because it makes it more likely that Sauron would be able to sense your presence. And if you use magic, or if one of your NPC allies use magic, that's definitely going to draw attention. It really gives a great Lord of the Rings vibe to the proceedings. In the adventuring phase, everything is pretty close to what it is in the Wandering Core rules, but you do get an extra stance, that being the skirmish stance. Here it is blown up a little bit, and basically the skirmish stance allows you to use ranged combat while you are solo, because normally you have to have frontline fighters to have somebody in the back hiding with a bow. So you do take a -1 penalty on your shots with the bow to your success dice, but your enemies also take a -1 penalty to trying to hit you with melee weapons while you're in the stance. And there's also a special combat task that you can do called Gain Ground. Gain Ground adds success dice to your next attack if you so choose to use that. Adversary actions just kind of helps define what you can expect the enemies of your group to do with their options. And of course, if you're ever unsure, you can ask the telling table. One of the biggest additions to the Strider mode from the regular rules is the solo journey events gives you tables that you can define what events look like. So if I am journeying, I have a number of events before I get to my location. And normally it is left very much for the lore master to define, but if you're your own lore master, you might want a little guidance on this. Honestly, I would use these tables even if I was playing with a group as the lore master, because it gives me a nice surprise to work with. So let's roll an event. So I got a 9, shortcut. So then I would go to the shortcut table and I would roll a success die. I got a 3. So helpful tracks. So it tells me that I could roll an awareness check to follow the tracks. So I would roll with the character that was assigned to the role that would be doing the awareness roll. In the Strider mode, all of them are going to be the same character. So, and then if I was successful, then I don't have any consequences. If I was not successful, then I would just gain the fatigue and move on. So, but there's one of those tables for each event on the events table. And then it talks a little bit briefly about the fellowship phase, which is where you do your recovery. And at the end, it has all of the tables from the Strider mode collected in one place. That's really nice. This next section here is from the Realms of the Three Rings supplement, and this is the 2 pages on creating elf lords for solo play. Elf lords are going to be much more powerful than your standard character, and for solo play, they work particularly well. So some of the differences are, you get to mark an additional skill as favored. You get to have a second calling, which gives you an extra shadow path, and it also gives you extra favored skills. The extra shadow path is nice because you essentially get 8 bouts of madness before you have to go retire. For previous experience, while normal mode is 10 XP, Strider mode is 15 XP, you actually get 20 points of XP to spend to start in Elf Lord mode. You also get valor and wisdom of 3, meaning you're going to get to start with 3 virtues and 3 rewards. As a reminder, the virtues are the special abilities that are mainly culturally focused, and the rewards are pieces of treasure that you have that will help you on your journeys. You also get to have 2 heirlooms, which are going to be magical items or precious objects. During play, elf lords get to take 2 main actions each turn, which makes them able to handle being outnumbered much more easily. They also have any endurance loss and fatigue gain. So if they would have taken 8 points of endurance, they only take 4. Lastly, when they're wounded, they ignore the roll on the wound severity table the first time. The next time they're wounded, they do have to roll on the wound severity table as they would have originally. This next section is the solo play in Moria, and this is obviously from the Moria book. This works very differently from Strider Mode. There is a little box here that says it's complementary to Strider Mode, a supplement for the One Ring that offers rules and tools for solo play, including expanded events for overland travel. That is a little bit deceptive because actually this just works very differently. It uses a lot of the tools from Strider Mode and adjusts them for Moria, but it focuses on a group, not a single powerful hero. Now you will have your hero and they will act independently from the group and have their own action, but it is not going to be focused just upon their actions. So in Moria Mode, you create your character, and that pretty much works the same as it does in Strider Mode, and the big difference is going to be your calling is going to be selected from a special group of callings in this supplement because your band and your character will have the same calling. Not a big deal. There's also a suggested patron, which would be Balin, because Balin is the one that is trying to reclaim Moria. It makes sense that he would be your patron. Now, when you get to your band, this is where it really gets interesting. So you actually build a group of adventurers, dwarves, to try to reclaim Moria. And let me get my sheet out, if I've got it here. There we go. So you will have a group of dwarves, which initially will be 6, but you can gain additional ones as you go. I have these laminated because these are kind of expendable characters. They could die. So, and you gain them as you go, so I want to be able to reuse this. You're also going to have a sheet that is going to track your missions, your overall roster, not just the ones that you're using at the moment, and the statistics for your band. Because really, each of these allies is going to be rather abstracted. You're not going to have a full character sheet. As you can see, this is 4 of them on one sheet. And they don't have really any stats. They have their gift, their kingly gift, and their quirks, and then their injury statuses, and whether they're hardened or not. So as you're building your group, you start with 6 allies, and you start with a readiness score of 4. Now, what is your readiness score? Your readiness score is basically how your attributes work in the standard game. So you subtract it from 20 to get your target number. So your starting target number is 16 for your band. Now, this is not going to affect your hero, but anything that the band makes rolls on, it's going to be based off of this number. Dispositions are what replace your skills. So your dispositions will be expertise, maneuver, rally, vigilance, and war. Anytime that your characters, or your band rather, are making rolls, they are going to choose one of these to roll from. And that's going to determine how many success dice you get for that roll. Now, your disposition for everything is going to start at 2, but it will be modified whenever you pick your specific band for each mission. Expertise is going to be for skills and knowledge. Maneuver is going to be for any type of movement. Rally is going to be for testing hardiness or courage. Vigilance is going to be their awareness generally. And war is obviously going to be their combined fighting strength and their ability to perform the necessary tasks in battle. Gifts are going to be like features in the regular game, but rather than offering the ability to be inspired when you apply them, they actually just give a flat single die, success die bonus to the action. The catch is, if you utilize a gift, the dwarf that has that gift is at risk. So if I've got a dwarf named Dwaylen, and Dwaylen is using his gift that gives him a bonus to a war roll, and it fails terribly, and somebody gets injured, well, Dwaylen is going to be the one that is up on the chopping block because I utilized his gift. Quirks are going to be personality quirks that give you a little bit of role-playing advice for the different characters. Injuries are handled a bit differently in this mode as well. As you can see, there are levels of injury and fatigue, not numerical. So you could have fleeting, moderate, severe, grievous, lingering injuries. As far as fatigue goes, you could have fatigued, faltering, spent, and collapsed. As you're going to have a number of dwarves, you're not going to worry about load as much, but your characters can still become wary. And that's going to happen when half or more of your allies are lost or suffering serious conditions. It works the same as wary does on any other roll. On your success dice, anything 1 to 3 is ignored if you're wary. So here I would have a 15, but if I was wary and I rolled a 3, I would ignore that because I would ignore a 3 or less. I'd only have a 9. At the end of missions, if a particular ally has done something to make himself stand out from the group, you can mark him as hardened. That's on your sheet right there. And if you do, that goes into the calculations of your group stats for the next mission. The number of hardened characters you have will make your force more imposing. The callings for the Moria mode are Reclaimers, Pathfinders, Standard Bearers, Guardians, and Vanguards. Each has a disposition focus, and that is going to be basically what inspired is to a regular character for the band. So if you were a group of Guardians, for example, vigilance is your focus. If you use hope, rather than gaining 1 die on a vigilance check, you'd gain 2 because that is your focus. It also has a group of favored skills, just like regular callings do, and your solo hero gets to choose 2 of them to be favored, same as normal. Then you have the shadow paths that are associated with each of these callings. So when you're creating your allies, you have all of these different tables to generate their gifts, and you have tables to generate their quirks. So let's do that. So we'll generate one gift, which is what they start with. So success die of 5, I'm going to go to the success die table of 5, and a feat die of 8, quartermaster. Carries extra supplies, tracks resources. So if I have to make a roll to do something, or if I say he's got a particular tool because he's a quartermaster that would be useful in this scenario, then I can add a success die to the roll. However, this quartermaster is then at risk if something goes wrong. For quirks, we roll the same. I got a 4 on the success die and a 3 on the feat die. Keeps a well-worn tankard on their belt. So this quartermaster would always have a tankard on its belt, and it is very well worn, which means he likes to imbibe a little bit, I would imagine. Then we have a name generator, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and roll a random name for him. So we've got the symbol of Gandalf and a 1. So 1 symbol of Gandalf, Uri. So Uri the quartermaster with his tankard of ale. Whenever you start to go on missions in Moria, it has a really generous mission table here. So you roll a feat die and a success die. So success of 5, feat of 5, capture an enemy spy and discover what they know. And then you could go to your context tables and figure out more what that means. But you can see each one of these could be nearly unlimited mission types. So when you are composing your force, the number of hardened allies will add to your readiness score, which, as a reminder, will drop your target number. Then your band's composition will help to set your disposition scores for each of your different dispositions, reminding you those are expertise, maneuver, rally, vigilance, and war. For example, if you have a large group, 9 to 12 dwarves, you're going to get a +1 to your war because there's more of you to fight, but a -1 to maneuver because fitting all of you through tight passages is going to cause bottlenecks. If you're going to travel geared for war, you're going to get another +1 to your war score, but you're going to have a heavy burden. Specializations also add to these. If you're experts, you get a +1 to expertise. If you're sentinels, you get a +1 to vigilance. So on and so forth. Now, I talked about the eye awareness score in the Strider mode section. This is actually defined differently here in the Moria mode, and there's a whole table that decides what your starting eye score is going to be. It also will go up based on the size of your group, and again, with your famous weapons and armor that you carry. It has the thresholds, which are the same as what they were in the core rules, and then they have some special modifiers for that. It talks about how you undertake missions, and it talks about when you have an injury to the group, what that means. So because you don't have regular, fully statted allies, they need a separate table that's going to cover how that works. Typically, what it comes down to is they're going to have an injury status, and it's going to take a certain amount of time for it to heal. Though, you can lose allies, too. Generally, the game is going to play out very similar to the standard game as far as resolution goes. You're still going to roll a success die, or I'm sorry, a feat die, and then a number of success dice for any action you're doing. You're going to compare it to your target number, just like you would in the regular game. But the results are going to be defined differently, and they're going to be here in these tools. Here are your tools that you saw already in the Strider mode, and special successes, experience milestones, so on and so forth. The biggest difference is going to be how battles are handled. So clashes are your standard form of battle, and they're handled, in my opinion, very similarly to the way councils are handled in the standard game. It's going to be setting a resistance and then trying to achieve a number of successes to get rid of that resistance. There are going to be individual objectives within the battle, and you're going to have to do some setting of how difficult each action is going to be. But it's not just going to be, I hit you, you hit me, I hit you, you hit me. It's going to be very much a back and forth narrative experience. It's going to be very abstracted, even more so than combat is abstracted in the regular One Ring game. You may like this, you may not, but that's how it's going to work. Now, within clashes, your hero can be involved in duels. So this would be like perhaps Legolas fighting the cave troll while his allies are all fighting the orcs. And so we cut away from the main battle and we do some rounds of dueling between the main adversary and your hero. And then at the end of that, we convert that into results that affect the main clash. It works really slick. It's not difficult. Councils and journeys work very much the same as they do in the regular game, with some minor differences. And there are some journey tables that are specific to Moria, which are nice. The fellowship phase talks about how that's going to affect your band, and then how you can upgrade your group by making them hardened, giving them kingly gifts, letting them heal, so on and so forth. Then at the end of the section, kind of odd to throw into the solo mode, but it talks about basically whatever you do, whatever you accomplish, the great successes that you experience, it is Balin's destiny to fall. He is not going to reclaim Moria. But you can always change that if you so desire. Then we get into the rest of my book, which is not the solo mode and not the focus of this video. So let's create a character. For character creation, you're going to need a copy of the One Ring core rules. And as an aside, isn't this the best feeling book that you've ever had? It just really feels like a lot of love and care was put into the creation of this, and I appreciate that. So the character for this is going to be for Strider mode, obviously, because this video is focused on that mode. And I did a poll last night, and overwhelmingly, everybody chose Rangers of the North. So that is what we are going to create. And so we'll put for our heroic culture, Rangers of the North, or Ranger of the North, rather. And the cultural blessing is Kings of Men. And for that, we get to add one to one of our attributes, either strength, heart, or wits. And then we also have the allegiance of the Dunedain. During the fellowship phase, you recover a number of hope points equal to half your heart score, rounded up. So that is going to be an extra blessing. We're going to abbreviate that. So I am going to actually randomly roll my attributes for this. You can actually choose per the rules in the game, but I'm going to roll randomly and see what we get. So I got a 4, so it's going to be a 6, 4, 4. That's actually a pretty good spread because there are no dump stats in the One Ring. So we've got a 6, a 4, and a 4, but because we are Kings of Men, we get to add one to these. So I could either increase one of my lower stats, or I could increase what I'm already great at. Now in the One Ring, Your target numbers for each of these is going to affect all the skills underneath. So strength is going to be used for all your combat proficiencies, as well as awe, athletics, awareness, hunting, song, and craft. Heart is going to be used for enhearten, travel, insight, healing, courtesy, battle, and any valor checks. Wits is going to be used for persuade, stealth, scan, explore, riddle, lore, and any wisdom checks. I think I am going to increase my wits because that also affects my parry rating, making me harder to hit. And just like in the NBA, the best ability is availability. So right now we can determine what our target numbers are. Normally you subtract these from 20, but in the Strider mode you subtract them from 18, making your target numbers easier to hit. So we've got a 12 and a 14 and a 13. We can also get our derived stats now. Endurance for Rangers of the North, because each of these derived stats is different based upon your culture. Rangers of the North have a pretty good endurance. They get 20 plus their strength rating. So I've got a 26 endurance. Now endurance is going to be my hit points effectively, as well as my encumbrance limit. So as I'm taking damage, my burden is getting heavier, and I may have to chuck my helmet off to be able to function fully on the battlefield. Heart, that is going to go to Hope, and for the Rangers of the North, it is going to be your heart score plus 6. This is the lowest of the derived stats for the Rangers, their heart score. So I've got 10 Hope. Hope can be used to add additional success dice to rolls, but also when it gets lower than your shadow, then you have bouts of madness and you can eventually be forced to retire. Wits is used to calculate your parry skill, and that is the target number for enemies to hit you. The Rangers have the best for parry, so they get a 14 plus their wits, so enemies have to roll a 19 to hit me. Most enemies have a combat skill of 3, so they would roll 3 success dice and a feat die. Right here, we have 8, 9, and 3. That's a 12. That's not going to hit a 19. Now, I also get to put down my skills, and those are specific to each culture. It tells you where the starting points for all of those are. And also you'll notice that 2 of them are underlined. I get to choose one of the underlined to be my favored skill. I always roll that with advantage, so I get to roll 2 feat dice and keep the better. So as a ranger, I'm going to have 1 in awe, 2 in athletics, 2 in awareness, 2 in hunting, 0 in song and craft, 2 in travel. Travel is going to be a very important role when you're doing your journeys. 2 in healing. Again, potentially pretty valuable for solo play. Battle. Now this is not battle as in swinging a sword, but rather battle as in checking out the lay of the land, figuring out where you want to be for your fight, finding advantages and disadvantages in the enemy's plan, so on and so forth. Stealth of 2, scan of 1, explore of 2, and lore of 2. Now, I get to choose whether lore or hunting is going to be my favored skill, and I'm going to choose hunting because that also involves tracking, and if I'm going to be a ranger in Strider mode, there's a good chance I'm going to be doing a fair bit of that. Now, combat proficiencies, it's important to note, proficiencies are not skills, skills are not proficiencies. They work the same whenever you're trying to resolve them, but it comes into play when later on you are advancing. There is a different experience track for these two different categories. So I get to choose to have a 2 in swords or spears, and then a 1 in one other weapon. So I'm going to choose a 2 in swords, and then I am going to choose a 1 in bows, because I'd like to be able to do a little ranged as well. And since I am in Strider mode, I can use the awesome skirmish stance and stay on the move and still be able to shoot a bow. Distinctive features, these are going to be quirks or role-playing opportunities that you can also use to say that you are inspired on a role. So, for example, I'm going to choose 2 distinctive features from a list for the Rangers of the North, and they're right there. I am going to choose swift and honorable. And I can use these whenever I'm going to spend hope to gain a die. And if I am able to justify using one of my distinctive features, rather than getting 1 die, I gain 2 dice. So let's say I'm tracking orcs and they are moving swiftly. So normally I would have my feet die and my 2 dice for hunting. I'd also get to roll a second feat die and keep the better of the 2 because I'm favored. But this is a really important roll for me. So maybe they've got my allies, maybe they've taken some hobbits I'm supposed to be saving. So I'm going to spend one of my 10 hope points to add a die. But I'm also going to engage my distinctive feature, Swift. I'm going to say, you know, because my character is known to be swift, he is inspired on this roll. So rather than gaining 1 die for the hope point, I gain 2. So I get to roll all of this. Oh, that's pretty good. So I got 2 6s, so I'll keep a 6. And then for my success dice, I've got 2 4s and 2 6s. So because I got 6s, they have this little elven T up at the top. That means I get to add levels of success. I can spend them to do things like make my task take a shorter period of time. So I've got 26 as my result. What I needed to roll was a 12. I also have 2 additional levels of success, so I'm going to get a very good success on this. So I would say that I have found the orcs, and maybe I even have, spending the 2 success, I will be able to ambush them. I've taken a path that they were not aware of, and I planted myself in a place where I knew that they would have to go through. And we'll use a name from the name list in the book. Will be Targon. And then we need to pick a calling. So the callings are kind of like your classes in a regular RPG, a D20 type RPG, but they don't have nearly as much impact on the game like most Freely games, honestly. The class type choices in those games just typically don't have as much impact. So I am going to choose to be a champion. And the description of champions are, you deem that there is but one way to oppose the return of the shadow, and that is to conquer it by strength of arms. You are recognized as a warrior among your folk, a valiant fighter, onward into battle. For you, the road to adventure leads straight to wherever your foes prowl or hide. So I get to choose 2 skills from athletics, awe, and hunting, and mark them as favored. Well, since hunting is already favored, I am going to choose athletics and awe. So with all 3 of those skills now, I'm rolling 2 feat dice and choosing the better anytime I need to roll those. I get an additional distinctive feature, meaning that I can engage that whenever I am using hope to get 2 dice instead of 1. And my distinctive feature is that I select a particular type of enemies and I have enemy lore against them. And I know their strengths, their weaknesses, their habits. And I am going to say orc lore. Hunting orcs. And then we have our shadow path, which is also determined by our calling. And that for the champion is going to be the Curse of Vengeance. Individuals who live by this order are ever tempted to draw it, either literally or figuratively, when their will is thwarted or when they deem their honor to have been impugned by an insult. As corruption spreads in their spirit, their behavior worsens, leading to more extreme violent reactions. And each of the callings has a series of types of bouts of madness that they will participate in when their shadow score exceeds their hope score. Now, lastly here, let's write down champion. I guess it's not quite lastly, but pretty close. We're getting there. Previous experience. So normally, you get 10 previous experience, but in Strider mode, you're going to get 15. And experience is the one time that you can spend the same currency to raise either skills or combat proficiencies. So raising a 2 to a 3 costs 6 points. And I'm going to do that because I want to be good with my sword. So that's 6 of my 15. I've got 9 left. I also want to be pretty good with my bow. So I'm going to raise my bow from a 1 to a 2, which costs 4 more points. So I've got 5 points left. And I think I need to kind of even out my character a little bit. So with 5 points, I can add 1 to several skills. So let's do 1 to insight, 1 to persuade, that's 2, 1 to riddle, that's 3, 1 to courtesy, that's 4, and 1 to enhearten, that's 5. Gives me just a little bit more of a chance if those types of rolls come up. I get to choose my starting war gear. Now, unlike most RPGs, you don't have like a set amount of coin that you're going to spend on your war gear. Basically, you start with what you want to start with. But as the endurance and load plays a great deal in the playing out of combat, you don't want to carry more than you need to or more than you're capable of based upon your strength. So, with your armor, that is going to be what protects you from a piercing blow and keeps you from dying, but also it's going to weigh you down because armor weighs a lot. The only thing you're going to worry about as far as your load, though, are your war gear, like your weapons and your armor. So I am going to take a longsword and a bow, and for armor, I am going to take a leather corselet, because I don't want to weigh myself down. So leather corselet is 6. The longsword is 3. And the bow is 2. So just with that, and I think I'm going to take a helm too. Yeah. So the helm is another 4. So with those items, I have 15 load. Remembering that load is also impacted by fatigue. So as I travel, what I'm going to be able to carry is going to lessen. And as I get hurt, it's going to lessen. So I don't have a lot of wiggle room. Now I could throw off my helm if need be in the middle of battle if I get too hurt and I need to be able to decrease my load. So we've got damage for the long sword being 5. The injury rating is 16, 18. That's because if I use it two-handed, it's 18. If I use it one-handed, it's 16. And then the bow, damage of 3. And the injury rating is 14. Now this injury rating, that is going to be what the enemy has to roll if you score a piercing blow, that being a 10 or a Gandalf symbol, when you attack. And if they fail their injury roll, their protection roll against the injury rating, then they are wounded. Most foes are going to be just outright killed when they're wounded. Now, it works the same for you, except for you become injured. So I get 2 protection die from the leather corselet and +1 die from a helm. So let's say somebody hit me with a bow. It's got an injury rating of 14. They score a piercing blow. Well, I need to roll a 14 or better, that's the target number, for my protection roll. I get 2 dice for my leather corselet, 1 for my helm, and I always get a feat dice. So I got a 14, 18, 21. So it did not injure me because my protection was there. But let's say I didn't have leather corselet, I just had the helm. Now I'm just going to roll a feat die and a single success die. 8. Didn't make it. I am now wounded. So it is important to have some sort of armor. Now, given the only time piercing blows typically happen are going to be if a 10 is rolled, or if it's the heroes rolling it, if they roll a Gandalf symbol, if the enemy rolls and I have Sauron, that's going to be piercing. Now, one of my real surprising likes of the system here is the reward and virtue system. When I first read this, I was not excited. I thought, well, another thing to track. But it actually makes a lot of sense and is very true to the spirit of the fiction it's based on. So with this, you start with 1 in each. And your rewards and virtue are also tied to your valor and wisdom. If you have 1 valor, you got 1 reward. If you got 1 wisdom, you got 1 virtue. And it allows you to define what growth looks like in your character in ways that appeal to you. So if you're growing your valor, you're gaining great pieces of treasure and forgotten marvelous items and weapons of legend and armor of legend. And you get to write those in your rewards and you get benefits for that. If you're gaining wisdom, then you are unlocking the cultural benefits of your choice. And, hobbits have special abilities that are true to hobbits, and rangers have special abilities that are true to rangers. And all of that's very cool. For your starting, you start with 1 in each, so you get to choose 1 reward and 1 virtue. Now, the starting virtues and rewards are a little bit limited, but whenever you advance, you can choose from a much larger list. So I, for my reward, am going to make my longsword keen, which gives it +1 to pierce. So now my longsword pierces on a 9 or better, not just a 10 or Gandalf. And then for my virtue, I can choose from raising my hope, raising my damage, raising my endurance, choosing 2 skills and making them favored, raising my parry, or reducing one of my target numbers by 1. And I think what I want to do is choose Dour-handed. And Dour-handed gives +1 to damage on heavy blow. That is when you spend a success level to add damage to an attack. And then I'm also going to get +1 on my feat die for pierce. So if I get a success, I could spend it to do heavy blow, which adds more damage, and it does additional damage for wielding the longsword two-handed as well. Or I could spend it to do pierce, which lowers what I need to roll to pierce. And I've already got a piercing longsword, so I already only need a 9. But with this, I might only need a 7. So at that point, if you're rolling these successes and being able to spend them on that, you're scoring lots of wounds and outright killing lots of enemies with one hit. Now, there are larger enemies that have mites of greater than 1, and they won't die to a single wound, but you're still going to clear out the field pretty quickly. I need to choose a patron, and for my patrons, in the basic core rules, I can choose from this list. And some of the other books, like the Realm of the Three Rings, add additional ones, and you can choose from those as well. We're going to choose one from the core rules. And I am going to choose Gandalf the Grey, which adds 2 to my fellowship. So my fellowship in the Strider mode starts at 3, but Gandalf adds 2 to it, so I've got 5. Fellowship points can be used to restore your hope points, so it basically gives me extra hope. That's good. And then I can also spend fellowship points to make a shadow test favored. So when you gain shadow points, you can often roll either a valor or wisdom roll to avoid taking shadow points. And by making them favored, I get to roll 2 feat dice and keep the better of the 2. That's good. I also need to choose a safe haven, and it does suggest that the town of Bree makes a good safe haven, because in the time period that the game takes place, this is between the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Rings, or the Fellowship of the Ring. This is a place of regular travel, because there are parties coming from Erebor after it has been freed from Smaug, and they're traveling to the Blue Mountains with treasure, and so this would be a place where a lot of people would be going through. It would give you an opportunity to go on lots of different quests, because you'd be hearing about lots of different opportunities. And that is pretty much the character creation process for the One Ring. And now we're going to do a quick combat. And just as an aside, I know I've had people comment in my videos before that they don't want to spend thousands of dollars on miniatures, and I get it. Or they don't have time to paint miniatures, and they don't like to have the gray or just the metal as they are playing a game. But these I created from scratch. Just grabbed an image online, printed a copy. All you need is a word processor and the ability to grab an image online and print it off, and you cut it, and then you make a half circle at the bottom on one side, a half circle on the other, and glue them together, or glue them or tape them together rather, and you've got a cave troll, or you've got an orc. And I've got tons and tons of these, and they cost next to nothing, and it took me all of a few minutes to create them. So you know, you don't have to spend a bunch of money to do this. Now, this board that I have here, this is the back of the map that comes with the Moria book, and basically what it does is it gives you a visual depiction of what the stances look like for keeping track of battle. You don't have to have this. You don't have to use miniatures. Lord of the Rings, the One Ring RPG is designed for theater of the mind play. But if you want some visual representation, it may add some flavor to the game. And as a reminder, these are the different stances, and they each add or subtract dice and give you specific combat tasks that you can do when you're using that stance. And if you're playing in skirmish mode, you can also use the skirmish stance. All of those different bonuses and actions are on the sides of this sheet, and also the order of activity is on this as well. So it gives you the whole battle procedure right here. So let's just go ahead and do a quick sample round of combat to show you how this all works. So you start off by taking opening volleys. So before combat even begins, if you have a ranged weapon, then you get to take an opening volley, and the enemy would as well. So let's say I have an opening volley with my bow. Before we get engaged, I would roll my 2 success dice for my bow skill and a feat die. And I got an Eye of Sauron. So that counts as a 0 for me. So I got nothing out of that. And I got an 8 for the rest of my roll. My target number on strength is 12, so I missed. So then we go into choosing stances, and I am going to choose an open stance, and open stances give me no advantage or disadvantage, and I can rally my comrades. The reason I chose that was basically just so that you see what a basic combat action looks like. So then we go to engagement. We choose how the enemies engage. And so in this case, both of these orcs are going to be engaged with Targon. And let's turn them so they can see the camera. They need their screen time. And the players always go first. You get a main action and a minor action. My minor action, I'm going to draw my sword. And then my main action, I am going to, of course, attack. Now, there are other main actions that you can use to enhearten your allies and to gain favorable positions and so on and so forth. There's more than just attacking in this game. But as Strider mode, I don't have allies to assist, and this is just a basic example. So with my sword, I have 3 in my combat proficiency. So I would roll 3 success dice and a feat dice. My target number for strength is 12. So normally I would need to roll a 12, but I am facing an orc soldier. They have a parry of +1, so I add that to the target number. So I need to get a target number of 13. So I got 2 successes. That's great. I got a 2 on my other success die, and I got a 3. So I definitely hit my 13, and I have 2 successes that I can spend on additional effects. So I can choose to do a heavy blow, which because I'm dour-handed, I get extra bonuses for. I can choose to fend off, raising my parry against their attacks. I can use pierce, which would increase my likelihood of getting a piercing blow. Unfortunately, as I only rolled a 3, even with my bonuses to piercing, I'm not going to quite get there. So I guess, though, I can choose them multiple times. So on a piercing blow, swords add 1, but I add 2 because of my virtue dour-handed. So I could go, if I used piercing, that would add 4. And I get 1 for my keen longsword, so that would be 5. That would still only be an 8 on my feat die. So I still wouldn't get a piercing blow. So not going to do that. So what I am going to do is heavy blow. And I'm going to choose heavy blow twice. And as I'm not using a shield, I'm wielding my longsword two-handed. So my longsword naturally does 5 damage, plus the heavy blow adds my strength and another point because I'm dour-handed. So my strength is 6, so it adds 7. It adds another point because I'm wielding it two-handed, so it adds 8, and I'm doing that twice. So 16 plus 5, I do 21 points of endurance damage. These guys only have 12. So he is killed outright. Now, to be fair, we'll go ahead and let the orc attack back and see what happens. The orc has a sword, and he has a 3 combat proficiency with that. So he's going to roll 3 success dice and 1 feat die. And he has to hit my parry of 19. And he got a 10, 11. He missed. So now technically he gets a secondary action too, but there's not much for him to do in this case except for maybe start to get his affairs in order, as he knows he is a dead orc. So we go around to the next round. You don't have opening volleys because you're already engaged. So if I swing my sword again, I get 16, 18. So that's definitely going to hit his 13. And I have a success die. So I could an extra level of success. But I only rolled a 2. So again, I'm not going to score a piercing blow. But I do my regular 5. I use a heavy blow, which adds 8 in this case. And so that is more than his endurance. So I kill both of the orcs. And that is the Strider mode for the One Ring RPG. Hopefully this video gave you an idea of whether this game is going to be for you or not. I think that it does this type of experience far better than anything else. And I like the Rolemaster Middle-earth role-playing game. I love Against the Dark Master. But for a true Tolkien experience, this is going to be my game of choice. If you have had any experiences with the One Ring yourself, I would love to hear what you think of this game. Do you like the abstracted combat system? Do you like the way that the target numbers are based upon your statistics and not a number set by the lore master? What do you think of the One Ring? Tell me about it in the comments section. And until next time, this has been Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.